And we're back with still on the theme of holly. This time we're looking at painting. So I've got my drawing in, or I've got a drawing in. The first thing you need to do is get rid of any unwanted scribbly marks or lines or overlaps. So you need to know which berry goes over the top of which leaf overlaps whichever leaves, and get rid of any lines that aren't wanted. And then the other thing is, although some of these colours are going to be dark, you still don't want to leave in heavy pencil lines. If a pencil line doesn't actually add something important to a picture, then as far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't be there. So lighten up as many of your sketch lines as you can. I'd recommend putty rubber for this, and rather than scrubbing away at it, you're probably going to get the best results by just rolling the putty rubber over your pencil marks. And I'm literally just pressing it in. As you all know, I don't clean my rubbers and things very often, so just be careful with that. But literally all I'm doing is pressing onto my pencil lines with a little bit of broken off putty rubber. Some of you may have these super duper eraser pencils. I don't want to erase the whole sketch line. I just want to lighten it so that when I put the paint on, I'm not fighting with outlines. I really don't want there to be hard outlines all over my picture, so I'm just lightening wherever possible. If however a line is going to be useful, then it's fine to leave it in. And again, it's a matter of personal taste. Some people don't mind or actually quite like sketch lines through their work. I'm afraid I don't. And my philosophy is, if it doesn't add anything, it's no point it being there. So there you go. Right, so I've got quite a collection of berries in the middle, and one of the things I mentioned in class last week was that holly berries are actually proportionately very small to the leaf. So using artistic license, I recommend that you make them a little bit bigger than they would be in real life. You're doing these as Christmas cards. The holly berry is very attractive. It almost makes the card. So for me, I've enhanced them quite a bit. They've had a bit of they've had a bit of surgery. I'm going to, before I do anything, I'm going to pick out some of the things that are in here, because once you've got a collection of things together like this, it can become quite difficult to see what goes where and what belongs to what. So I'm going to start by putting on a few washes. The colours that I'm using, just to make life simple, is I've got lemon yellow, which I've already mixed. It's not a particularly weak wash, but it's not too thick either, because I'm going to use this as an underwash. So I've got lemon yellow, and I've also got cad yellow. If you don't have cadmium yellow, you can put a tiny, and I do say tiny, tiny touch of red into a separate pool of lemon yellow, and that will warm it up a bit. But if you've got cad yellow, again, it's not a very thick consistency, but it's thick enough that it's not going to run all over your paper. So just do a little test, just drop a little bit somewhere. If it splurges out, it's too thin. Then I have got some Sap Green on its own, but I've also got a little bit of Sap Green mixed with the yellow, so it gives me another range of colours. And then I've got Hooker's Green mixed with a little bit of burnt sienna, which gives me a much darker green. And then I've got Hooker's Green mixed with a tiny little bit of burnt sienna, but quite a bit of ultramarine blue. So it gives me a very blue-green dark colour, which I'm going to use on some of the leaves. And then for the berries, I'll be using the cadmium yellow, but with a little bit of cadmium red and then alizarin crimson. I've also got a little bit of ultramarine blue on its own and sort of dirty mixed up here, which I will be using for shadows on the berries when we get to that point. But my starting point is to identify whatever I've got on here. So I'm going to start by using the Cad Yellow, and I'm just going to put this on all the berries first and foremost. This will make sure that I've got the berries identified as separate from some of the shapes that are left between the leaves. It's very easy to suddenly look down and realize you've either not painted a berry or you've created berries where there aren't really meant to be any, and it's not so easy then to get the paint out. So all I'm doing is literally just putting a quick wash. I'm not even leaving highlights in this, because when I actually come to paint the reds on, the yellows will become the highlights. So I'm simply masking in or covering all the berries. You don't have to be overly careful. Try to stay roughly within the edges. But at this stage, it isn't the end of the world. They're all slightly different tones. Again, I'm not worried about that. It's ideal if you've got different shades in there. Next, I'm going to do something similar with some of the leaves, not all of the leaves. Now, some of these leaves are pretty much on top of others. So the ones that are on top, I'm just putting a little bit of lemon yellow in, and then I'm washing it into the leaf. So lemon yellow, water, and just pulling that through into the leaf. Normally, when I'm using this technique, I stay away from the edges until I'm ready to get to them. So that one's done. Here's another one that's on top. I'm going to wet this one first and then add some lemon yellow. It just affects the colours and the tones in the leaf. So you can see as we're applying it that the lemon yellow is actually quite a bit sharper. They always say it's cooler, and I guess it is in a way. But lemon yellow, you'll remember from class, is one of the few yellows that you can actually sometimes use it on a darker colour. So when we come to do things like the ivy trees, lemon yellow comes into its own because it's a slightly opaque colour. So those ones are done. Again, this one's on the top, so I'm just going to put a little bit of a wash of lemon yellow in. And you don't have to do every leaf. It's a matter of personal preference. I'm just rushing through this so that hopefully I can get some of this done to a point where it's sort of finished. So as it's Halloween tonight, has everybody started with all the, well, it's not truly Halloween, but it is the Saturday before Halloween. So I have no doubt that the doorbells will be ringing and what have you. My husband and I are delving off into fancy dress later. That should be good for a laugh. I can go and frighten the grandchildren. Great. So hopefully everybody's stocked up. I'm sure some of these kids that come to my door will probably not be impressed. I haven't bought any sweets for them. I have just bought loads and loads of little tangerines and fruit. Having seen the amount of sweets that people have been buying over the last few days, I just thought I'm not adding to the future dental crisis. So yes, the little rascals will be having fruit at my front door, I'm afraid, like it or not. Hopefully They won't mind too much. This one's slightly darker because it's got more, it's slightly underneath the other one. So realistically, all I'm doing is putting a little bit of this yellow pretty much on the one side. I'm not going to bother with the other. But what I am going to do is just damp it along that edge so that I don't end up with really sharp, hard lines that I might not be able to cover up when I come to add the next layers of paint. Although the next layers are darker, so it shouldn't be a huge issue for anybody. But just a word to the wise on that one. If you've got hard edges left, it can be a bit of an effort to get them back out. So I've got my lemon yellow on the leaves that I want it on, and I've got my cad yellow on the berries. You'll notice I've got a really super huge, he had all the goodness berry in the centre. I have noticed that tends to be a bit of a thing with me that I do a lot. I like it. It's my painting, up to me. So I'm just re-wetting that first leaf that I put in, and I'm going straight into the sap green. I'm just going to run it along that side. I'm getting the brush up on its point, or up on its toes, so to speak, and just pulling into those little tiny points. Now, it's very, very tempting to go and pick up one of these brushes that has, you know, 2 hairs in it. Please don't. Get used to using the biggest brush possible, because as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to move on to some of the advanced landscapes and things if all your brushes, or the only brushes you're comfortable with, are little tiny, almost invisible. All I'm doing is softening along this center line. And then I'm coming in on the other side. I'm going to re-wet it slightly, not soaking wet. It's a damp brush, so be careful with your water control. If it looks like it's too wet when you've put it on, just wait a second or two before you go in with the next layer of paint. I'm going to put a little bit of dark right around that bottom edge, on that side and on this side. Again, wetting, cleaning my brush, wiping excess water off, and I'm just going to pull this dark slightly down into the leaf until it bleeds out. The only reason for doing that is because I want this to create a shadow impression there. I don't want it to be a really hard line. Same on this side, just going behind the paint that I've put in, moving it around, re-damp, and I'm putting in this darker colour onto this side. So this is the Hooker's Green with some burnt sienna in it. And because my paper is slightly wet, it's sort of creating these little bleeds and a little bit of fusion between the colours, which really is all I want. Because we've got the yellow underneath, then you're going to get different tones showing through anyway. And here we go. I'm just softening all this together so that I don't end up with outlines and hard edges. Now I can wait until this is dry completely and then go back in, but I'm just going to crack on. So all I'm going to do on this side is not on the other side, just this side. I'm just going to use the brush and bring this down along what would be the center line to the edge. I'm going to add a little bit of shadowing under those curves there. Make sure my points are pointy. These want to be capable of drawing blood. coming up to that time of year where everyone's going to be having little holly pricks in their fingers. I'm sure there's a quiet giggle in the background there, but there you have it. And then I'm going to leave that one to dry and move on. I'm going to go and do this one. Same process pretty much. I'm going to wet the leaf. This time I'm going to do it slightly differently. I'm going to wet the whole leaf. Not worry too much about those points around there. Slightly more water on the brush. I'm going into my Sap Green and I'm just letting that bleed all the way along on its own. I'll go and tidy it up in a minute, but because it's wet, it will do that. So there's my Sap Green spreading all across this leaf pretty much by itself. Just watch your berries. If you do touch on the berries, you can always wipe it off. Now I'm going into my mid green straight away while this is all wet. Again, careful around that berry. And then while it's all wet, I'm just going to run this mid green along some of the edges. Let it pull through. Encourage it all to blend together. Back in with a little bit of my Sap Green. So that in the end, each one of these leaves will be slightly different. I'm going in with a little tiny bit of my very dark right along this bottom edge. And in a way, all it's doing is providing a background for the berry. Dry the brush off. Encourage this to blend and run, and off it goes. I'm going to leave that one to dry and I'm going to move down to this one. Again, same process. I'm just going to wet the entire leaf, Sap Green, and this time I'm just going to give that just a second to let it mix back in together. Pull it all the way through. And at this stage it's very much in development. So this is the stage when people suddenly do that strange thing where they go, oh, it's rubbish, and have a bit of a paddy and throw it in the bin. And what you need to do is you need to leave it, let it settle, let it dry, and then you're in a better place to judge what is or isn't working. So all I'm doing is going back into some of the medium dark, and I'm just outlining this edge. And again, I'm going to do the same around those berries. I'm just picking up some of the dark so that it's creating a negative painting, and then allowing this just to bleed back. I'm going to add a little bit of dark, or the medium dark, just down here. But I'm just allowing it to bleed in. I'm not attempting to cover the whole leaf. Again, you might want to add just a little bit more definition on some of those edges. But if it doesn't need it and it doesn't add anything, then leave it and let it dry. You can always add another layer over the top once it's dry, if you actually feel that you need to. But at the moment, you won't be able to judge that. So that one's quite lemony. This one is underneath, and because that overlaps there, I'm going to leave that and come back to it in a minute. So I will go to this one. I'm just going to go straight in with the mid green on this one, so I'm not bothering with the sap green at all. And then where we've got this overlap with the berry, I'm just touching in a little bit of that really dark green and encouraging that to blend. So here, brush up on its point. I might even add in a little tiny bit of red on this one. And you can see here there's a couple of shapes. I said to you it would be easy to get confused between what's a berry and what isn't. And you can see why I said that. Because as I'm pulling these points through, you can see that some of the shapes where a few of these leaves almost interconnect creates these slightly oval or rounded shapes. So by putting a colour on at the outset, I've avoided mixing up where those would be. So I'm just pulling some of these shadows down. On this one, I'm just going to use some of that dark to put through to this point. And then we're just going to soften that in there. Again, I'm going to leave that and just let it settle and dry. I'll go back to this one now. Now this really is going to be a leaf of two halves, because a large part of it is going to be affected by the fact that this other leaf is sitting over the top and also interlocks with it. Then I'm going to use mainly the dark. Certainly around here, I just want to define and separate it, and you can leave a little area of unpainted there if that's going to be easier. And again, I'm going to take this right down here. I have very cunningly just touched into that other leaf. Wow. And as we get towards that point, my brush is running low on paint, but I'm not going to reload because that will have the effect of making it lighter in the areas that are slightly further away. I'm going to just wet behind this line so that I get a soft edge here. And then add a little bit more water onto this side. I did say it was going to be a leaf of two halves. Wow, we're drying very quickly today. So I'm just going to go in with a little bit of the sap green and the mid green. I will be coming back around there in a second. And back into some of my dark. Slightly damp paintbrush just so that I can blend behind those so that I don't end up with really hard areas. Again, I'm leaving that. Oh, look at this naughty leaf. Never mind, we'll fix it in a minute. Right, this one, just going to wet. Sap Green. I'm letting it pool in the middle of the leaf for now, and then feeding it out from there. I'm almost definitely going to leave a little bit of yellow showing through on this one. Some of the mid green. So we've got our first wash on, and I think that's probably a very good place to finish. Back in a little while.